The Richest Man in Babylon. The 5 Laws of Gold. A bag heavy with gold, or a clay tablet carved with words of wisdom. If thou hadst thy choice, which wouldst thou choose? By the flickering light from the fire of desert shrubs, the sun-tanned faces of the listeners gleamed with interest. "The gold, the gold," chorused the 27. Old Calabab smiled knowingly. "Hark," he resumed, raising his hand. "Hear the wild dogs out there in the night? They howl and wail because they are lean with hunger. Yet feed them, and what do they? Fight and strut, then fight and strut some more, giving no thought to the morrow that will surely come. Just so it is with the sons of men. Give them a choice of gold and wisdom. What do? Ignore the wisdom and waste the gold. On the morrow they wail because they have no more gold. Gold is reserved for those who know its laws and abide by them." Calabab drew his white robe close about his lean legs, for a cool night wind was blowing. "Because thou hast served me faithfully upon our long journey, because thou cared well for my camels, because thou toiled uncomplainingly across the hot sands of the desert, because thou fought bravely the robbers that sought to despoil my merchandise, I will tell thee this night the tale of the 5 Laws of Gold, such a tale as thou never hast heard before. Hark ye with deep attention to the words I speak, for if you grasp their meaning and heed them, in the days that come thou shalt have much gold." He paused impressively. Above, in a canopy of blue, the stars shone brightly in the crystal-clear skies of Babylonia. Behind the group loomed their faded tents, tightly staked against possible desert storms. Beside the tents were neatly stacked bales of merchandise covered with skins. Nearby, the camel herd sprawled in the sand, some chewing their cuds contentedly, others snoring in hoarse discord. "Thou hast told us many good tales, Calabab," spoke up the chief packer. "We look to thy wisdom to guide us upon the morrow when our service with thee shall be at an end. I have but told thee of my adventures in strange and distant lands, but this night I shall tell thee of the wisdom of Arkad, the wise rich man." "Much have we learned of him," acknowledged the chief packer, "for he was the richest man that ever lived in Babylon. The richest man he was, and that because he was wise in the ways of gold, even as no man has ever been before him. This night shall I tell you of his great wisdom as it was told me by Nomasar, his son, many years ago in Nineveh when I was but a lad. My master and myself had tarried long into the night in the palace of Nomasar. I had helped my master bring great bundles of fine rugs, each one to be tried by Nomasar until his choice of colors was satisfied. At last he was well pleased and commanded us to sit with him and to drink a rare vintage, odorous to the nostrils and most warming to my stomach, which was unaccustomed to such a drink. Then did he tell us his tale of the great wisdom of Arkad, his father, even as I shall tell it to you. In Babylon it is the custom, as you know, that the sons of wealthy fathers live with their parents in the expectation of inheriting the estate. Arkad did not approve of this custom. Therefore, when Nomasar reached the man's estate, he sent for the young man and addressed him. "My son, it is my desire that thou succeed to my estate. Thou must, however, first prove that thou art capable of wisely handling it. Therefore, I wish that thou go out into the world and show thy ability both to acquire gold and to make thyself respected among men. To start thee well, I will give thee 2 things of which I myself was denied when I started as a poor youth to build up a fortune. First, I give thee this bag of gold. If thou use it wisely, it will be the basis of thy future success. Second, I give thee this clay tablet upon which is carved the 5 laws of gold. If thou dost but interpret them in thy own acts, they shall bring thee competence and security. 10 years from this day come thou back to the house of thy father, and give account of thyself. If thou prove worthy, I will then make thee the heir to my estate. Otherwise I will give it to the priests, that they may barter for my soul the kind consideration of the gods. So Nomasar went forth to make his own way, taking his bag of gold, the clay tablet carefully wrapped in silken cloth, his slave, and the horses upon which they rode. The 10 years passed, and Nomasar, as he had agreed, returned to the house of his father, who provided a great feast in his honor, to which he invited many friends and relatives. After the feast was over, the father and mother mounted their throne-like seats at one side of the great hall, and Nomasar stood before them to give an account of himself as he had promised his father. It was evening. The room was hazy with smoke from the wicks of the oil lamps that but dimly lighted it. Slaves in white woven jackets and tunics fanned the humid air rhythmically with long-stemmed palm leaves. A stately dignity colored the scene. The wife of Nomasar and his 2 young sons, with friends and other members of the family, sat upon rugs behind him, eager listeners. "My father," he began deferentially, "I bow before thy wisdom. 10 years ago, when I stood at the gates of manhood, thou bade me go forth and become a man among men, instead of remaining a vassal to thy fortune. Thou gave me liberally of thy gold. Thou gave me liberally of thy wisdom. Of the gold, alas, I must admit of a disastrous handling. It fled, indeed, from my inexperienced hands, even as a wild hare flees at the first opportunity from the youth who captures it." The father smiled indulgently. "Continue, my son. Thy tale interests me in all its details." "I decided to go to Nineveh, as it was a growing city, believing that I might find there opportunities. I joined a caravan, and among its members made numerous friends. 2 well-spoken men who had a most beautiful white horse as fleet as the wind were among these. As we journeyed, they told me in confidence that in Nineveh was a wealthy man who owned a horse so swift that it had never been beaten. Its owner believed that no horse living could run with greater speed. Therefore would he wager any sum, however large, that his horse could outspeed any horse in all Babylonia. Compared to their horse, so my friend said, it was but a lumbering ass that could be beaten with ease. They offered, as a great favor, to permit me to join them in the wager. I was quite carried away with the plan. Our horse was badly beaten, and I lost much of my gold." The father laughed. "Later I discovered that this was a deceitful plan of these men, and they constantly journeyed with caravans seeking victims. You see, the man in Nineveh was their partner, and shared with them the bets he won. This shrewd deceit taught me my first lesson in looking out for myself. I was soon to learn another equally bitter. In the caravan was another young man with whom I became quite friendly. He was the son of wealthy parents, and like myself, journeyed to Nineveh to find a suitable location. Not long after our arrival, he told me that a merchant had died, and his shop, with its rich merchandise and patronage, could be secured at a paltry price, saying that he would be equal partners, but first he must return to Babylon to secure his gold. He prevailed upon me to purchase the stock with my gold, agreeing that his would be used later to carry on our venture. He long delayed the trip to Babylon, proving in the meantime to be an unwise buyer and a foolish spender. I finally put him out, but not before the business had deteriorated to where we had only unsaleable goods and no gold to buy other goods. I sacrificed what was left to an Israelite for a pitiful sum. Soon there followed, I tell you, my father, bitter days. I sought employment and found it not, for I was without trade or training that would enable me to earn. I sold my horses. I sold my slave. I sold my extra robes that I might have food and a place to sleep, but each day grim want crouched closer. But in those bitter days I remembered thy confidence in me, my father. Thou hast sent me forth to become a man, and this I was determined to accomplish. The mother buried her face and wept softly. At this time I bethought me of the table thou had given to me, upon which thou had carved the 5 laws of gold. Thereupon I read most carefully thy words of wisdom, and realized that had I but sought wisdom first, my gold would not have been lost to me. I learned by heart each law, and determined that when once more the goddess of good fortune smiled upon me, I would be guided by the wisdom of age, and not by the inexperience of youth. For the benefit of you who are seated here this night, I will read the wisdom of my father as engraved upon the clay tablet which he gave me 10 years ago.